What's up? So this lecture obviously talks about analyzing your audience, and as a good public speaker, as kind of goes along with listening a little bit, but you got to be able to understand your audience. Not only the audience, the physical audience, the people that make up the audience, but maybe even the environment and the emotional situation that maybe that audience is in. So analyzing the audience is really key. We really want to focus in on that. Now, we're not going to be able to, as the quote kind of says from Abraham Lincoln, you're not going to be able to please everybody every single time. But the idea is if you can get a large majority of them to kind of get in and kind of understand and to lock into what you're talking about, then that's going to really help you out a lot. Now, so let's just jump right in. So the idea, the concept that goes along with what we're kind of doing when we're creating our speeches is we're trying to create what's considered to be an audience-centered approach. This is kind of a Griffin approach, not Gryffindor, that would be awesome, but more of an author, a public speaking textbook author. Her name is Griffin, and she says that students need to create more of an audience-centered approach, which is really good. It's a good idea to think about. And the idea that goes along with that is that you should keep your audience in mind from the conception of the topic. So when you're thinking of the topic and coming up with it and what you're going to do, then you should keep the audience in mind. And I really like that idea. I think that's a really good thing to kind of to look at. I had a student here recently that came to me and said, I think I'm going to do my speech on baseball. Now, I love baseball. I think baseball is a really cool sport. It's a lot of fun. But let's be honest, baseball can be very, very boring. So as he said, I'm going to do my speech on baseball. I just start having these flashbacks of these really bad speeches about baseball and football and basketball and the origin of them. I said, rather than doing something on baseball, why don't you find a real colorful person in baseball and then do something on them, and then that still is around baseball, something that interests you, but then it also is something that maybe for people that are not into baseball, but just like interesting people, so that they can listen to as well. So he's like, hey, that's a good idea. So I have 3 questions here that I kind of took from another textbook, and the idea here that we're looking at is that you want to look at who am I actually talking to? What is my audience comprised of? Are they a group of first graders? Or are they a group of college students or graduate students? That's going to really hinge on my topic and topic selection and what I'll be discussing. And then what do I want them to know, understand, believe as a result of my speech? Now that's a big deal because as we get into things like specific purpose statements in a minute or in a little while, that's something that is going to be something that we really want to lock in on. So at the end goal, the behavioral objective of my speech, what do I want them to see, feel, and do? And then the last thing, what is the most effective method? Now, I personally feel that 50 minutes in a college classroom with someone just talking aimlessly about whatever they really want is probably not the most effective method. I think that you need to incorporate things like video and different kinds of audio and music and kind of engage people and get more discussion. Those things work, but for other people it may not, and it may depend on whatever you're talking about. The idea that goes back to one of the first lectures that we had on this whole series is you're trying to create identification. You're trying to create or build that bridge between you as a speaker and the audience. Why are they going to want to keep listening to you? And you can do that when you're more audience-centered. So, something to really think about. Remember, identification. The audience is trying to figure out ways they can identify with you, and you're trying to figure out ways that you can identify with them. So, what makes up your audience? Well, demographics make up an audience, and demographics are characteristics that comprise that audience. And they can be like general things like sex and gender, sex and gender are the same thing. That's silly. Gender, it could be sexual orientation, it could be race, it could be education level, it could be religious affiliation. All of those things make up a demographic. So it could be a political association and what they have. Right now, of course, it's very popular, so you want to find out what group affiliation those people have. So demographics are important. You can generally obtain demographics by maybe even a survey. You can do that survey in a written survey, or you can do it in a hand response survey. Now, you can also do a visual survey, but you've got to be really careful with visual surveys because sometimes you may assume that people are a certain age and they're not. You may assume people are a certain gender and you're not. And as we talked about before, you never want to assume. You definitely don't want to assume if you want to become an effective public speaker. So demographics are important. Know that definition for the test because it's going to be on there. So The next thing goes down to, if you understand these three things, then everything in your life as a public speaker could be a little bit easier. So if you can understand your audience's beliefs and their attitudes and their values, then it may help you in developing your topic more. It may help you more in the idea of how you can actually function with certain key components. Beliefs are like things that are true or false. Like, people believe in ghosts or they don't believe in ghosts, right? So that's a belief. So if you show them evidence that there really are such things as ghosts, which if you do have that, I'd love to see it. But if you can do that, then people will tend to believe it, right? So those are not super hard to change. But as we progress down the list and we get to things like attitudes and values, those become more difficult to change. People's attitudes, it's going to take a lot longer for you to adjust people's attitudes. Because their attitude may have been locked that way for a long time. But as you inundate them with more information, more facts, more figures, then you may be able to make some adjustments with that. Now, values, that's the core of our existence, right? So we have certain values that we've maybe learned from our parents, or we've learned from church, or we've learned from family or friends, and those values we hold really true. So it takes a lot longer for those to be able to change. Now, as a speaker, if you understand these three components and how they can function with your audience, then you have more firepower to be able to work with them and to be able to discuss, and you'll kind of understand and relate from where they're coming from. So the last thing we talk about are the physical and psychological factors that are associated with audience analysis. And obviously, physical factors deal with things like the actual room makeup, how big the room is, how small the room is, the way the chairs are set up, the temperature of the room, if there are windows. Those kind of things are really come into play. For example, if there are windows and you've got a group of 5-year-olds and there's a construction site going on, then they're going to maybe want to watch the equipment. They're going to watch what's happening because those things are more exciting. So you've got to be just as exciting or more exciting than those things. So audience size is another thing too. A lot of people get really tense when they go, oh, there's going to be 500 people there. I have learned that when you have a large audience of like 500 people or more, then if you focus on just the first row, 9 times out of 10, if there's can lights coming at you, you're only able to see the first row anyway. So maybe the rest of the people are not even there. So the idea is that it's okay. It's going to be all right. But you still should understand that that is a variable and a factor that you can kind of work with a little bit if you know about it. From a psychological factor, this goes from the setting. Like, what have these people been? What have they heard before? What are their feelings about certain things? And how can I say something that maybe brings them together, or how can I say something that just mitigates maybe some of the what's going on? Now, I know that all sounds like really negative stuff, but the idea is that depending on the audience and what they're doing and what the situation is, those are situations you may get into as a public speaker. So remember setting, remember context. We talked about that in the first lecture. Context, that's really important. And an audience has a context. They have an environment that they're in. They have situations. Although it can kind of go in and out, it still is a context. And we need to kind of keep that in mind when we're analyzing them and what they've been doing. So that's a little bit more about audience analysis. Hopefully that helps you a little bit. And if you have any questions, again, you can email me, and I'll be happy to answer those questions and get back to you as soon as possible.